It's very important to understand that there never was an ancient Palestine.
All right, let's see it.
When the Romans beat the Hebrews, they renamed the land in their native tongue, which was Latin. The name they gave the land was Syria Palestina, which means new land in Latin.
So the only part of that was not just pure and utter nonsense was the fact that the Romans did actually rename this region following the Bar Kokhba revolt around 135 CE. But Syria Palestina is not a Latin name. It does not mean anything in Latin. It certainly doesn't mean new land in Latin. It is a borrowing into Latin of two Greek terms that originally designated two separate regions. Syria in Greek comes from Assyria, which is a borrowing into Greek of the earlier term Ashur, which is a designation of the land of Mesopotamia. Palestina is a borrowing into Latin from the Greek Palestini, which we find as early as the 5th century BCE in Herodotus as a designation for the shoreline from Phoenicia down to Egypt. And sometimes it is used to refer to regions further inland, like Judea. And Herodotus did not make up this word. It was actually borrowed into Greek from earlier Semitic languages, because we find it in Akkadian, the term Palastu and Pelistu, which are used as designations of the region we now know as the Gaza Strip and other parts of that shoreline. It's also found in the Hebrew Bible. The term Peleshet is used 8 times as a designation of the region we now know as the Gaza Strip and other parts of that shoreline. And it goes back even further because it is borrowed into Semitic languages from Egyptian. Around 1200 BCE, the term Pereshet pops up in Egyptian as a designation for the sea peoples who migrated into the region and caused a lot of disruption to the Eastern Mediterranean. And those populations likely originate in the Central Mediterranean around Mycenae. And they would become what we know as the Philistines, which also comes from Pereshet. And in Egyptian, they don't distinguish the R from the L consonant, but terms that get borrowed from Egyptian into Semitic languages frequently replace the R with an L. So Pereshet becomes Peleshet in the Hebrew Bible, comes Palastu and Pelistu in Akkadian, becomes Palestini in Greek, becomes Palestina in Latin. So the designation Palestine actually has etymological roots that go all the way back to the arrival of the Sea peoples around 1200 BCE. And genetic testing on the populations that occupy the regions we now know as Palestine show they have genetic roots that go back to the Bronze Age, even before the arrival of the Sea peoples. Guess what other group has genetic roots that extend back that far? Jewish populations that occupy the regions around Palestine. So both of these groups have historic and genetic roots that extend all the way back into the Bronze Age.
I can understand how people mix up the two, but they are not the same. Syria Palestina was Roman, which had nothing at all to do with Arabs or Muslims. Palestine, on the other hand, was an adopted name by Arabs in 1948, ironically from the British colonialists to create a false narrative about an ancient land because it was almost spelled the same.
This notion that Palestine is a name that has no connection to the peoples that occupied this region anciently is itself a demonstrably false narrative. And the fit for this video has been the Uncanny X-Men number 201.